Hey, everybody, welcome to Hope for Our Times. And we are live. That's right, we're live. We're going to take your questions live. We have a lot to talk about. My guest today is Lee Brainard. I almost said something else, Lee. It would have really set off the rockets. Glad I didn't say that. But Lee, it's great having you join me. Always great to see your smiling face.
Tom, it's good to be with you and the Hope for Our Times family, and there is a lot to talk about today.
Yes, there is. So Putin has dropped the bombshell, actually a couple of them. We're going to talk about that, where you see this going. You've talked a lot about Ukraine and Russia recently. I have several questions to ask you, and we're going to get to them. Also, you know what I'm going to ask you about today? The 10 Kings. You did a video not too long ago about the 10 Kings. I'd like your opinion on that. And then differences of doctrine. Some matter and some really don't matter for salvation. We have some rather interesting things to discuss, and we'll hold that for the latter, maybe even for the Q&A. Again, folks, get ready to send in your questions. Put your word question, or put your question in all caps so we can see it. It'll easily stand out. But we are going to be starting here by talking about Ukraine and Russia. Then we're going to get into the 10 Kings and also Israel and Russia. But first of all, I want to mention this here at Hope for Our Times, maybe on Lee's channel too. I would just ask you, please check your YouTube subscription, because we've heard that people have been unsubscribed without their knowing. And I don't want to say too much along those lines, but you guys can figure that out. So if you would, check your subscription, see if it's there. If you've been unsubscribed, hit that button again, and also the notifications. And I would say check Lee's also, because interesting things are happening with those dynamics. So check your subscription. Again, we've heard people have been unsubscribed without their knowing. Lee, are you ready to rock and roll?
I am ready, brother. 24/7, 365.
Okay, are you ready to go to Ukraine and Russia first and then over to Israel and Russia?
Absolutely.
Because, get this, troops have been reported on the Syria side, Russian troops, of Israel's border. So, wow, that to me is fascinating. We'll get there. Okay, Ukraine and Russia. We are watching things escalate. As of yesterday, it's threat of World War III. Putin, it was said he's going to nuke part of Europe, or just getting people afraid of that. And we do know that missiles were launched by Ukraine into Russia. And check this out, Lee, I know you're well aware of this, but for everybody else, this is worth mentioning. Senator Mitch McConnell remarked at a press conference on Tuesday that he felt the Biden administration has been too slow in its efforts to help Ukraine win their war against Russia, saying the approval to use U.S.-provided long-range missiles should have been given months ago. So we have all these dynamics. We know about the missiles. Lee, let's take it from here. Lots to talk about. World War III, Russia, Israel, 10 Kings, and other things. In fact, Jess asked the question. Here it is. You ready? Already. Do we really think Putin will use nukes?
Okay, great question. Give folks a heads up. My internet here is a little bit unstable. I'm at the...
Lee is on the road. If you can't hear Lee right now, he was doing good a few minutes ago, everybody, but...
a lake in Oklahoma. So if there's not believe.
So Lee's on the road in Oklahoma. So that's what's going on there. So this is my assessment until his internet catches back up. I don't believe that Putin is going to do it. I believe either he's calling bluff, or there's even reports say it was actually fake. It was misinformation. Never really said that he was going to do that. But I do think that the warmongers here in the United States, they want to do everything they can to provoke Putin to use nukes or whatever is necessary in order to give them an escalation for something to launch into World War III. So do I really think Putin is going to use nukes? No, I don't. but it doesn't mean he won't. And Lee will be back in just a minute. But let me go through some more things, because check this out. This is fascinating here. Anthony Blinken is giving another $8 billion to Ukraine to just continue this warmongering. But let's shift over here until we get Lee to rejoin. Again, he's on the road in Oklahoma. Check this out. World Israel News reports that Russia is deploying army forces on the Israeli border. So what is going on with that? This is really interesting. Russia's military has deployed ground forces along the Israeli border. Syria has claimed establishing a number of observation points opposite the Israeli frontier. So if you're familiar with the nation of Israel, okay, Lee's back. So if you're familiar with Israel, if you've ever been up there to the Golan Heights, like on a tour or something like that, you're standing up there, and especially at Mount Bental, where that coffee shop is up there, Kofi Annan, you're looking into the Syria border. So this helps us to understand, when you have that visual, because if you've been to Israel before, imagine the Russian troops right there. You have the demarcation line there of the UN, but you got Russian troops right there. Russia is saying that their troops are there. They're basically just making sure, get this, I gotta make sure I get the right words here. It is for the purpose, you ready for this? A Syrian army officer whose identity was not disclosed said that Russia's deployment near the Israeli border increases stability and security. In other words, they're there for surveillance to make sure there's no terrorist problems. This is what they're saying. And helps residents return to their land. In other words, helping the Israeli residents return to the northern parts of Israel and lead normal lives in their villages after being liberated from terrorism. Lee, could you hear anything I just said?
Yeah, and great remarks, Tom. I think the Russian presence there in the short term is going to be a blessing, or at least an apparent blessing. In the long term, it's going to be very problematic.
I do too. So let's go there with you. Okay, so we have these different dynamics going on with Putin. Again, we'll get back to Ukraine. I left that right after you signed off because I want your opinion. But with Israel, Russian troops there, you're thinking, what in the world's going on? For anybody who's familiar with Ezekiel chapter 38, in chapter 38 of Ezekiel, everybody, verse 7, it specifically says, God says that Gog, the leader of the Gog-Magog invasion with Russia, Iran, so forth, coming against Israel, Gog, the leader of Russia, will be a guard for all the troops that are coming against Israel. And that's a detail, by the way, that's often overlooked. People skip that part. Wait a minute, God actually told us when Ezekiel wrote that, some 2,500 years ago? That Russia would be a guard for the troops coming together. And that's exactly so Russia's playing this partly, we're going to protect, we want to help Israel. I mean, this just totally plays into Ezekiel 38, doesn't it? We want to help Israel. We want to help them get resettled. But according to God, no, they're setting up there as guards for the troops that are going to come against Israel. I find it fascinating reading something like this. Pookie has a question. Pookie, we'll get to yours in a minute, but let me turn it over to you, Lee.
Well, to me, when I first heard about the 9 observation posts that are being built along the Israeli border in Syria there, I thought, this is interesting. I can't believe that anyone in Israel that really understands the geopolitical scenario is going to be happy. But what do you do with this? It's enemy at your gates is really what it is. This is going to ultimately prove to be a tremendous thorn in Israel's flesh. And then that thorn is going to turn into the Gog and Magog juggernaut. But in the meantime, she's going to have the pressure of her Western allies, the pressure of the world community to accept the presence of the Russians there. And they're going to be called neutral for this situation. They're going to help protect Israel against the terrorists and against extremists. I wouldn't be surprised if ultimately we see foreign troops from other nations along the Israeli border and the Lebanon border too. I think this is really setting a precedent. And ultimately, all that is going to do is just be the vanguard for the future developments for the Gog and Magog juggernaut. To be honest, I would not want to be in Israel's shoes in this situation. I'm glad I'm watching it from the American frontier out here, but I'm definitely in prayer for our brethren there in Israel.
You chicken. You're such a warrior. I was just going to ask you if you go to Israel with me. Oh, Lee, you just...
I'd love to. If you're going, count me in.
Listen, if you can go with me, I would love it. I'm going in March for anybody who wants to go with us with me in March. Lee, you could join us. I might even have Howard talked into going. Listen, it's great, but I mean, but you're right. When you look at it, I don't believe we're going to be here for the Ezekiel 38 war, but I believe what we see coming with Israel is this. I mean, this is such, the way you describe that is exactly, I think you're just spot on. And when we know the Ezekiel 38 battle coming, listen, when you look at Trump, and I think of, I don't put Trump as Antichrist, no, I don't put him as Jesus Christ. He's neither of those. He has currently been elected to the position of the President of the United States, but with that position, I believe he's bent on wanting to fulfill the Abraham Accords and the normalization agreements, and a lot of what I believe he's going to do, assuming he's allowed to serve his term, is going to be to bring a peace and security to Israel that will be between what's going on with Russia now on their border and with Trump coming in normalization agreements. To me, it seems like the perfect setup to bring Israel to a place of everything de-escalates. What do we know also? Ezekiel 30, though this battle will come against a land of unwalled villages in peace and security, or peace and safety, meaning tranquil. So, I mean, I'm looking at the times we live in, Lee, and it's like a wow factor. I mean, I would have said that 3 weeks ago. Now I say it even more.
Absolutely. The contrast between what we're experiencing right now and what you and I experienced 30, 40 years ago when we were young men, it's tremendous. Because back then, we were looking at some hints of what's coming down the pipe. And a lot of what we were talking about for prophecy was still on the horizon. Well, we're waiting in this stuff between knee deep and waist deep now. And pretty soon that rapture trumpet's going to blow, and it's going to go right over the head of everyone left on earth.
Oh, I am looking at this going, man, we better be ready for that rapture trumpet, because when I just don't see, when looking at Biden administration being so anti-Israel, Anthony Blinken, you had Amos Hochstein involved, you have all these different players, then you bring in Kamala Harris, even more anti-Israel. I was thinking, how's Israel ever going to get to a place of the peace and security of Ezekiel 38? Well, all of a sudden, you throw in this dynamic. This is a bombshell for Putin right here. Just this one thing alone, you're looking for anybody who understands Bible prophecy. This is like incredible. And then you throw in the Trump factor. We live in amazing days, which we can come back to this, but I do have this question I want to get to, because Pookie asked this question. And by the way, Lee, just so you know who Pookie is, he probably follows you and comments on yours. So Pookie, I got it. He's a pretty funny guy. So I showed a clip of the spokesperson, Karine Jean-Pierre, or whatever her name is. You know, the one for Biden. You know that lady, curly hair? You remember? Pookie called her curly fries because of her hair. So Pookie, you're not going to be able to call her curly fries. I mean, call her curly fries, but you won't see much of her anymore. Sorry, Pookie. So here's sorry. They came up with James Cadiz the other day too. Okay, ready? So Pookie says, I believe all the nukes and the other shenanigans is to slow down the Trump inauguration in 2 months. How do you feel, Tom and Lee?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what the end game is here, but this is what I do think. I'm not convinced that America is actually under threat from from nuclear weapons from Russia or China. I don't believe either of those nations would dare pull that off. There's no chance that they could get the upper hand in such a thing. It's either going to be we have the upper hand and they get completely creamed, or both sides get creamed and there's nothing left. However, that said, I will not be a bit surprised if Putin actually uses, and we've talked about this in the past, smaller tactical battlefield nukes and launches them against Kyiv and important places in Ukraine, enough to do enough damage, and then maybe a few on the Baltic states, something along this line, Poland, just to warn the West. Listen, we are playing hardball here, and we're calling your bluff. And there's been this tit for tat thing where we up the weapons grades that we're offering to Ukraine, and Russia ups her attacks. We up, like recently, we just gave Ukraine permission to use the ATACMS missile system, which has a range of 190 miles. You bring that up to the Russian border, and now you can reach deep into Russia, 180, 185 miles into Russia. And that's what Russia is really incensed about right now, because we've increased the weapons categories that we're allowing Ukraine to use against Russia. And Russia is taking this as a direct threat from the West. This is why she's changed her nuclear doctrine from that they reserve the right to, if they feel threatened by nukes, that they can use nukes first. And if they're attacked by nukes, they can respond with any nuclear force they please. Well, now they've upgraded their nuclear doctrine to where if they're feeling threatened, if the integrity of the nation is threatened by conventional weapons, they can use nuclear weapons first. This sounds crazy to a lot of military strategists, but really, you've got the Russian Siberian tiger backed into a corner, and she's getting angrier and angrier and angrier. It's going to come to the point where she's going to leap with her fangs and claws bared, and I think that could include the tactical nukes.
Okay, so with that, while you were reconnecting, I mentioned that I'm not so sure that Russia will use nukes in the sense of, there's, you wake up, I shouldn't say wake up, but over the last 24 hours, much of Europe is on this high alert because of these news reports. Personally, I believe a lot of this is created by the current U.S. administration to stir up fear, because when you have fear, you can really manipulate the masses. But the challenge, I can see what you said makes a lot of sense, but what I can't see is Putin just going all out, because in my mind, I'm thinking, Putin, if you look at it, Trump's going to be in power and the whole dynamic's going to change. Would he not just want to wait this out as long as he can, knowing that it is the U.S. administration is doing everything they can to poke the bear? So
yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. With that, couple things for you. First of all, Kurt Reed is in the chat. Hi, Kurt. And I know that Lee would like to say hi to you too.
Hey, Kurt.
I knew you would. So good to see you, Kurt. Okay, here's a question. And it kind of goes along the lines of both things we're talking to, but I'm not sure exactly what Tony means, but it's Tony Picciola. Hope I pronounced your name right. Sounds very Italian. Will this war be the Ezekiel 38 war or lead to it? So, okay, I'm going to lead, because one of my questions for you is regarding Ukraine and Ezekiel 38. So, Tony, I'm not sure exactly which one you're referring to, what Lee and I were talking about. I believe, and Lee does, the Ezekiel 38 wars in the future, but we are definitely looking at a setup for the Ezekiel 38 war, however long that takes. But with that, Lee, we look at Ukraine. Ezekiel 38 says, God says, I'll put hooks in your jaws and turn you around. When he says, I'm gonna pull you down and bring you into the land of unwalled villages, because God wants to deal with this group of people. So when they say, will this war be the Ezekiel 38 war? I'm thinking, if you're talking about the Ukraine war, could it be that part of it? Because it's not the Ezekiel 38 war. Clearly,
yeah,
that's Europe. That's clearly not it. But could it be where God is pulling, he turns them around and puts hooks in their jaws and pulls them down, because he's talking specifically to the leader of Russia at that point.
Right. Well, personally, I think that the war in Ukraine, if it expands into other parts of Europe, that it's just stage setting, same as you. And the wars that we see in Israel right now, again, I think that the efforts with Hamas and the Gaza Strip, the efforts with Hezbollah in Lebanon, this is, plus the whole Iranian problem. I think this is all stage setting. And whether we have to only wait 6 months or whether we're going to wait a few years or more, it's hard to say. But this is all definitely heading for that great showdown with Gog and Magog, in which ultimately this is a showdown between the Russian-led juggernaut and God. God's going to take that personally. But in the meantime, what is going to be this motive that's going to take Russia down there? Well, the first motive that comes to my mind, the hook in his jaw, to dominate the entire oil scene in the Middle East. Russia needs those natural resources. She has some natural gas and she has some coal, but she needs the oil in the oil infrastructure in the Middle East for her military juggernaut. I think that's going to be one of the biggest hooks in her jaw. I think another hook in her jaw could just simply be that the Middle East nations, especially the Arab-led ones, want her presence down there. And that would be a hook in her jaw. So it's going to be interesting to see how all this comes together. In the meantime, I do believe we're going to have to see resolution one way or the other with this Ukrainian affair, because I don't believe Russia is going to head south until she wraps up events up north and then gathers with her allies and heads south. I'm expecting, I could be wrong, but I'm expecting Russia to consolidate a lot more territory and power in Europe than she has, but time will tell. She's certainly going to be heading south one way or the other. Well,
I totally agree. In fact, I look at it, poking the bear by the Biden administration, I believe, is a lot of the problem. You know, Russia's going to do what Russia's going to do. And I am not a pro-Putin guy at all, but it's just looking at some obvious things, which is going to lead to the next question that just came in. It's from Carol Moody. Carol, we'll get to your question in just a minute. I think it's a great question that really speaks to, that is very concerning for everybody. So I'm looking forward to your question. Lee will love addressing it too. But Iran's totally been embarrassed by Israel. That's obvious. Hezbollah, I mean, God has just totally given Israel the upper hand. Embarrassed Iran. Russia's been somewhat embarrassed by what has happened. Their weapons were used and different things like that. And I agree, there's no way Russia's just going to turn around and say, no, we're done. Especially now while Biden is in, you have the Biden administration, not going to do it even with Trump. It will just be, it just can't take this embarrassment. So the hooks in the jaws has got to be extremely enticing. You know, thinking of a fish that's getting hooked and then reeled in. It's got to be something that says, I'm going to take that bait and go for it, because it's going to be absolutely remarkable. And Carol, again, I'll get to your question in just a second, but I do want to remind everybody of this again. Listen, check out if you subscribe to this channel, or at least check them out, because it appears some people have been unsubscribed without their knowing. And if you have been, go ahead and click on that subscribe button, or if you don't subscribe, go ahead and do it. And also click on the bell to get the alerts. And Lee, I forgot this. I have your book right here on pre-trib rapture. I want to get to that in a few more minutes, but can I get here first with Carol's question? Because you're going to love this question.
Absolutely.
Okay, so here it is. Carol Moody, do you think that the CIA might do false flags and use some kind of nukes here? They keep talking about a mass casualty event. They were, remember that? If you just go back a month or two, mass casualty event. It's coming. Yeah, it's a great question. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting when we start going down this path. We were really hammered pretty hard with the events of 2020, 2021. It brought us to a place where it's very difficult to trust our government. We've had other things happen with food processing plants and some railroad disasters where we're scratching our heads and we're saying the odds of this many events happening just randomly that's really pretty low. So it brings us to a point of distrust. So now, is the purpose in the future just to leave us always fearful, or is there a purpose to actually bring more of this towards us? And really, it's not so much, I think, against the American people as it is just trying to steer the political process, work in fear. So it's hard to say. I mean, we could see a false flag thing. We could see some disaster that's allowed to happen, or who knows what. But we also might just be getting our fears played with. Time's going to tell. I've gotten to the point now where I just throw my hands up in the air when we're come to issues like this, because playing the guessing game, that's all we're doing. It's just so easy to bat 5% on these things.
Oh, totally. You know, you look at it, and we know what the end's going to be. We can tell what the Bible says. We know the Ezekiel 38 battle's going to happen. I can see the perfect candidate to help set that up would be Trump, the normalization agreements, what's going on with Russia right now, being a guard for the troops, setting up Israel to bring their refugees back. You know, you start looking at it, you're going, well, it totally makes sense. However, if all of a sudden Trump doesn't make it January 20th, well, there goes that theory. But we know the Ezekiel 38 battle will still happen. Just
yes, absolutely.
Some of it is the exactly how it gets there. I liken it to this, Lee. When Jesus came the first time, there were prophecies. He'd be born in Bethlehem. He'd be called out of Egypt. He'd be from Galilee. You have all these different things about his first coming, and yet the prophecies were all true. But there's nobody that could have predicted exactly what was going to happen. That Caesar Augustus was going to issue a decree that everyone needed to be registered to their own city. So nobody could have figured out. So this young couple's going to come out of Nazareth. They're going to make their way over to Bethlehem to be registered. She's going to have a child. They're going to stay there until the child's almost 2, and then Herod the madman's is going to seek to kill all the little Jewish boys in Bethlehem, so they flee to Egypt, and then they get called out of Egypt, and they're back up in Nazareth. Nobody could figure out all those how-to details, but we do know all the prophecies were yet exactly 100% true. And I think that we're kind of there, so we can see now, we can really see the shape of Ezekiel 38, 39 take place, the globalism, the last 4.5 years of the crazy things that we're not allowed to talk about, all these different dynamics, but we don't know exactly how it's all going to come about. And there's so many different theories that are floated out there that I personally believe are psyops and meant to confuse people. I think they're psyops that are even thrown into the prophecy community that are intended to take people away from God's word. But we always got to come back to God's word and remember, it keeps us centered. So if it doesn't happen exactly as we're thinking, it might happen like this. I'm sure I'll get in trouble for saying this, but what if Trump's assassinated next week? What happens?
I thought of that myself.
Yeah.
That shoots a lot of theories in the foot, doesn't it?
It does. So you start looking at these things, and I remember, and I got to get back to the questions here, and I want to get to the 10 Kings. I want your thoughts on that. But I had this friend I did ministry with, Frank Eichler. I think he's about 85 years old now. He was a founder of Shalom International, and he was really like my mentor in helping me understand Israel and the Jews. It was wonderful. Still get to talk to him about once a year. Lives in the great state of Texas now. He got smart, moved out of California. But he said to me, we were talking one time, we were driving down the freeway to go record at his studio, and he says, we got on the subject of Antichrist. And I asked him, I said, you ever predict Antichrist? And he goes, yes, 12 times. And they're all dead. And then he was saying it real sarcastically, and then he looked at me, because I was driving, and he said, don't you ever do that. Don't ever start doing those things. So it was a great bit of wisdom from him. I did predict Antichrist one time. Javier Solana, I thought, gosh, like 20 years ago. I don't know if you remember who he was in the EU.
Wasn't he from Spain?
Yeah, I thought he was Antichrist. I was so convinced of it, and I was wrong. So anyway, so enough of that. All right, let's get back to some questions. Derek Ulrich from Piney Grove, greetings from your driver from Piney Grove Baptist Church. Oh, wow, that is great. North Carolina. Hope all is well with you, brother. Thank you, Derek. God bless you. And looking forward to seeing you guys next time, too. It's going to be great down there in North Carolina when we're out there again. Okay, are you ready? Let's switch over to the 10 Kings.
Okay.
Okay. My thoughts keep, I would say, I think I'm getting more and more clarity on who the 10 Kings were. If I look back 20, 25 years, I was convinced 10 Kings, it was these 10 leaders in the EU. Then I've taken the approach of the J. Vernon McGee, global, there are 10 regions, which I still think is the case. But I might be wrong because I'm also looking at what's coming out of like Silicon Valley, for example, and these,
Yep.
the Elon Musks, and I'm not naming who the 10 Kings are, everybody. I'm just giving examples, so don't go say I'm naming anybody. But with that, what are your thoughts on the 10 Kings themselves from, we know from Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Revelation chapter 17, there would be this 10 king global system before Antichrist comes into power?
Well, the first piece of the puzzle for me is that it's the Roman Empire that's going to dominate the world. A lot of people start with the idea that the UN is going to divide the world up into 10 pieces. I think that's a secondary part of the puzzle, that whole concept. I think the first part of the puzzle is that there's literally going to be, when the Roman Empire starts coming together, there will be 10 kings in this reconstituted Roman Empire that are going to share power. They're going to be part of the power coalition with the Antichrist. Now, traditionally, most of the prophecy teachers held that these are just going to be the 10 heads of state and that they just get to be these power as kings. But I'm really warmed up to this idea. I think it has a lot going for it, that this Roman Empire, when it's divided up, it comes together, it's not going to be just 10 nations. It's going to be 10 regions in that Roman Empire. And they're going to have over them people appointed by the Antichrist. I think it could be the technocrats. That really makes sense. The technocrats are the ones who are really ruling the world right now, at least on the front side. On the deep side, it's hard to know who the deep state faces really are. But on the front side, the people that are pulling the strings are not the heads of state, it's the technocrats. You know, you might get someone like Trump that shakes this stuff up a little bit and he's too independent for them to control, but that's another story. Now, once this Roman Empire coalition comes together, then from there, they are going to dominate the whole world. And I think that's where the 10 divisions of the world come in. You know, the UN has its version. I've seen several other versions of how to divide the world up into 10 regions. I think that will probably be true too.
Yeah. You and James Cadiz are along the same line on that. You both have the same thinking. James and I have argued about that in the past, but you know what? Between you two guys, you're both pretty smart, and James is convinced I'm going to come over to his side one day. So maybe you're helping to pull me over there. I find it so fascinating. There's, just as we press forward in this, Judith Maynard has a question for you.
Okay.
I know my answer, but let's hear your answer. Is the Vatican the little horn of Daniel chapter 7?
I don't believe so. I believe the little horn is actually going to be a nation. And on one kind of a level, the Vatican is technically a nation. And yet I would point out that that we have the woman that rides the beast. So there's whoever the woman is that's riding this beast, it's distinct from the 10 kings that are the reconstituted Europe, and is distinct from the little horn of the Antichrist. So you come in the middle of the 70th week, and this woman is burned with fire. Now, it's many dispensationalists traditionally, and I follow Dave Hunt in this, have held that this is religious aspect of Babylon, that you're going to have all the nations come together and all the religions of the world come together in one global religion, probably led by Catholicism after Islam is destroyed in the Gog and Magog Psalm 83 situation. So once religion's out of the way, then you're free to open the doors for the Antichrist religion. But if the Vatican is part of this woman that rides a beast and is destroyed, then she can't be the little horn. That's my thinking.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, so you said the little horn you believe is a nation.
Well, it's going to be a nation and a man.
Okay, so that would go along with Revelation chapter 17, where you have the seventh is also the eighth.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying? Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. By the way, I have a guest that's going to be on the program here in the not too distant future. He believes that the little horn is America, and he was a professor teaching eschatology, and we get along on so many things, but we have a total disagreement on that. And that ought to stir up the pot when I have him on. He's actually a really good friend of mine. And
yeah. Well, it's definitely a minority position.
Well, he'll definitely stir the pot. It'll be a lot of fun. Sometimes I like to stir the pot. By the way, Pete Garcia says hi. He's in the chat too.
Hey, Pete.
So yeah, we got all these guys joining us today. Okay, so Lee, we have a lot more to talk about. I'm going to get to this in a second, the rapture. We did get your book. It's right here, because I got to ask you about that. I want to come back to Putin and the reality just one more time. Could we be ready to enter World War III in a minute? But Laurie Saunders asks this first. Do you think the Ezekiel war might be what Antichrist uses to make the covenant with Israel? So I'm not sure if she's asking before the Ezekiel 38 war or after the war happens. So I guess we can address both of those.
Yes. Well, whether you make Psalm 83 war and Ezekiel 38 and 39 two separate things or kind of coalesce them together, or whether you think that Psalm 83 is a different question, is not involved, and we just have Ezekiel 38 and 39, however you resolve that event is going to happen. And it's going to leave a power vacuum. This power vacuum is not only going to leave a vacuum for, the Russia and Turkey and Iranian juggernaut that's always trying to influence affairs in Europe and the Middle East, but it's going to be a death knell, in my estimation, to fundamentalist Islam. It'll still be around, but it won't be a massive problem in the world. That's going to really change the playing field in the Middle East. So in that sense, with this Gog and Magog thing done and out of the way, it really paves the way for the Antichrist to bring this treaty to the table where, okay, Israel can safely embrace a two-state solution, because she's not now having to worry about fundamentalist Islam, and she gets the bone thrown to her that she gets to have her temple. So in that sense, then I'd say, yeah, I think it could be the impetus that leads to the treaty that Israel is going to make with the Antichrist.
Yep, I agree 100%. Totally makes sense to me. By the way, Lee, you need to let me know when you're going to be in California again. I'd love to have you in studio. I've had Bill Salas here in studio. John Haller's been here just last week. We had Scott Townsend. So when somebody's in Southern, Bill doesn't live too far from here, but when somebody's in Southern California, I'd love to have you here. It's fun to just go back and forth in person.
Amen.
So let me know when you're driving out west again, and I'll take you out for Mexican dinner again too. So with that, also this, we will be, Kurt, we're going to be at your church, Kurt Reed, in Las Vegas, January, 17th, 18th, and 19th for a conference. You ready for this, Lee? Here's the name of the conference.
Okay.
Are you sitting down? Blazing Saddles, right? Blazing Saddles. We took it from, so Billy Crone had the Three Amigos, right? So Billy and Brandon both texted me earlier today from Switzerland of the Three Amigos stuff. So we're going with Blazing Saddles. So check this out. It's Billy, Brandon, myself, Kurt Reed, and it's at Pastor Kurt's home church, and Don Perkins. So all five of us are going to be there, and it's going to be a great conference. I wish you could be in California, but I'm going to let me know when you're in the area. We're going to do something, but it'll be great, everybody. We'll do the registration here within the next few days to join us at Kurt's Church in Las Vegas. Blazing Saddles. I love that for the name of a prophecy conference.
Well, the saddles will definitely be blazing in Revelation 19.
Yes, they will. Boy, does that give us a lot to talk about. It's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, you ready? So, this will have to be, I've really got to get to World War III. Is it going to happen? I mean, we don't know, but the severe threat of it, we've already discussed it, but I want to close out with a little bit of hope too. And that's why we can talk about the rapture and your book. And we don't have a lot of time left, but I got to do this one. Shannon Batson says, thoughts on Elon Musk? He's talking about Neuralink, right? Or she is. The blind will see, the lame will walk, the deaf will hear. Pretty sure that Elon could call fire down from heaven with the recent rocket launch and watching that thing land back. That was pretty cool. So your thoughts on Elon Musk? You know what? I don't think Lee or I are into predicting who Antichrist is, but hey, what are your thoughts?
Well, Elon Musk is really an enigma in many ways, because when you look at the technology he wants to bring to the world, if we're not walking in Christian discernment and we're just looking at the apparent blessing that would be to the world, how can you complain about curing diseases? How can you complain about technology that's going to reduce how hard we have to work to get ahead in life? How can you complain about the adventure of exploring and mining space? I mean, this stuff is, in my mind, in and of itself is neutral. But there is a dark side that's involved in this that should really, in fact, there's a dark side that's behind much of the Republican Party. This should just make Christians wary. This should have us put on our discernment hats and be deep in the scriptures and deep in prayer. We know that this whole direction of the incoming administration, no matter how much anti-globalism we think we see in it, it's not going to stop the globalism juggernaut. And whatever they bring to bear on the table for legislation that looks like it's good and for technology that looks like it's good, we know the dark side is going to use it and abuse it.
Yeah, even when you think Elon Musk, well, if you go back 100 years or so, 150 years, just go back and you find out there were some extremely brilliant people, Nikola Tesla and many others, and all kinds of inventions. I was in the 1970s, I was in high school, and I had auto mechanics, right? Auto shop, all 4 years. And I remember reading Popular Mechanics. I remember reading about engines that were invented back then. I remember reading about them running on water and all kinds of things that have been going on for a long time that never make it out there. But there's been brilliant minds, brilliant inventors. They've been here for a long time. Elon Musk lives at a time where you have all of these things taking place at the same time. And it's almost like this. The system of the beast couldn't happen without something like Starlink.
Oh, yeah.
So you look at that, it's really remarkable when the whole planet's about ready to be covered. So you start putting things like this. There's a lot of things. It's like everything's going to be fulfilled when God says now, and it looks like God is putting everything together just about now. So I look at that, I'm not going to make a prediction on who or what Elon Musk is, but we can see all the telltale signs of all of the systems and everything that the Bible speaks of. They're definitely coming together, and they're coming fast. Deborah Cayley, I don't have time to get into your question about the book of Daniel and feet mixed with iron or clay. So sorry. Maybe next time, because Lee will be back again. Maybe next time we'll get to your question, but I want to get here. Okay. All these, or the next question. Okay, you guys, stop sending me questions. Listen, B, I can't answer your question either. But I want to get here because okay, we've already talked about World War III. If it happens, let's say a nuke gets launched from Russia. They do something. That is a huge immediate change. Could you imagine all of a sudden we wake up here, or we're waking up at 3 a.m. and something like that just happens because the news is broken out throughout the world? It would send shockwaves around the world in 1 minute. What do you think that would be like?
Well, it would be terrible, because if nukes were launched, whether it was a full-scale launch or a partial launch or just 2 or 3, the stock markets around the world would collapse. Energy markets would collapse. It would be chaos. The stores there'd be a run in the stores, run in the gas stations. It would be chaos in America and in Europe, and no good would come out of that. Now, this is a scenario that because most prophecy teachers believe that America is not going to figure, or at least not figure prominently in prophecy in the last days. If they're correct, then this is a legit scenario that needs to be considered. If this is true, then something is going to break the back of America. That she is no longer a superpower, that she's at best a second-tier nation that's going to be used and abused by the revised and restored Roman Empire.
I look and go, it would shake things up. It would change everything forever. And we would be immediately launched into another world. And it would give everything necessary to bring about that new world order and a global system to control the madness. But I'm looking more forward to the rapture, because that's great. And that's something great to talk about. Lee, you have your book. I know we didn't get to this at all, but we do have it. Recent Pre-Trib Findings in the Early Church Fathers. It's an excellent book, everybody. I highly recommend it. You can check it out in the Hope for a Time store. But with that, Lee, give us some hope about the rapture, and then we'll wrap up.
Well, folks, we live in a world with growing chaos, with growing frustrations, with growing totalitarianism in government, even when they promise liberty and freedom. We have the threat of technology hanging over our head. We have the threat of a digital system and social grading hanging over our heads, and it's discouraging. I regularly receive emails from people that say, I don't even want to go another year. How can things get much worse? Well, folks, I can't guarantee you that we're going to go up this year. I hope we do. I can't guarantee you we're going to go up next year. I hope we do. But I can guarantee you this, that God has your best interest in stake. And he is not going to allow you as an individual or us as the church to go through any trials down here that are not going to get rewarded with a millionfold, billionfold, trillionfold interest in heaven. So just remember that the scripture says your light afflictions, which are but for a moment, work for us a far more exceeding and infinite weight of glory. That's coming, folks, at the rapture. So just hang on, trust the Lord, keep looking up, and keep praying up.
Lee, it is always great having you here. You're such a joy. You always bring your smiling face. And every Christmas, I remember your face. I've told you that before. I won't bring it up this time. But you're always you're always just wonderful to have on the program. I love your brother. Okay, with that, is there anything on your heart and mind you would like to share before we close off?
Yeah, just one brief thought. Folks, we have an agreement, a very, very strong agreement in addition.
Oh, no.
Dispensational camp on the fundamental doctrines, on the gospel, and on the core pieces of dispensationalism. And we should contend together on these points against one that comes against us. But when we come to our in-house differences on secondary points of dispensationalism and our theories on how we connect the dots and how prophecy is going to be fulfilled, let's be very gentle and gracious with our brothers when it comes to those matters. You know, here's an issue where some people think America is the little horn and some don't. We can have gracious conversations. Some people think Trump is laying the foundation for the Antichrist globalist government, and some people think Trump is bringing a sledgehammer to the globalist order. Well, let's just look at each other's bullet points and observations and have a friendly disagreement. There's no reason to divide over these issues, folks. Absolutely no reason.
Great. Thank you very much, Lee. And by the way, J.B. Hickson will be joining me next week. And my friend who says Little Horn is America, he'll be joining me within a few weeks. That's gonna be a lot of fun. Nothing like stirring the pot, baby.
Well, it gets people thinking.
Well, I totally agree. I totally agree. Lee, as I said, you're always a delight to be here. Thanks for joining us, Pete, and also Kurt, and join us in Vegas if you can. And also, thank you, Derek from North Carolina. Look forward to seeing you. And everybody else, thank you for joining us. And God bless you guys. Keep Lee in prayer because he is on the road heading probably to Branson. God bless you, everybody.